All right, guys, we are going to learn about our last region of North Carolina today. So we learned about the mountain region, and that was way on the inside of the state. It has lots of mountains, right? It's our tall region, mountains, and we learned about some of the plants and animals that live there. Then we learned about the Piedmont, which is right in the middle of the state where we live. And it's not quite as tall as all the mountains in the mountain region, but we've got some hills. It's kind of hilly, right? And then we get all the way to that last region where it's really flat and we have the beach. Can you remember what it's called? The coastal plain. So today we're going to learn about the coastal plain, our last North Carolina region, and some of the plants and animals that live there. So, oops, here we go. Here's the coastal plain, and it's this purple section all the way over here where the ocean is. So there's the coastal plain. Here are some of the plants we're going to learn about: a Venus flytrap, a maritime oak, Spanish moss. And for the animals, we're going to learn about a great horned owl, crayfish, and wild horses. Are those the only plants and animals in the coastal plain? No, there's lots more, but we picked 3. So here's the Venus flytrap, and you might have heard about this before. It's usually pretty cool. So you guys, it's very popular around the world, but it only grows in a small area around the town of Wilmington in North Carolina. So we don't have Venus flytraps all over North Carolina or even all over the coastal plain, just down in Wilmington. And Wilmington is a town in North Carolina right on the edge of the state where the ocean is. So a lot of times when we go to the beach, we go to Wilmington, even though that's not the only place in North Carolina with a beach. It's pretty popular. So that gives you kind of an idea of where it is. And we find it there because it needs sandy soil to grow, like near the beach in a marine forest. So here, our soil is not sandy like at the beach, right? No, it's not. So they can't grow here. They need sand. So they live down near the beach in Wilmington. The flytrap is a carnivorous plant. Look at that word right there, carnivorous. What word does that sound like that we've already learned about this year? The carnivore, right? So carnivores, we know, eat meat. So check this out. This plant is carnivorous. It eats meat. And you might say, what in the world? But it does. It eats insects. And what happens is, you see these bristles right here. It's kind of like its mouth or its teeth, and it hangs out open. And if something brushes up against those bristles right there 2 times, the trap closes. So I'm going to kind of show you with my hands. When these are like its bristles, and if something brushes up against it twice, it snaps closed in less than a second. So really fast. 1 Mississippi is 1 second. So it closes really fast. And then while it's closed, it decides, kind of like we do. We taste food and we decide, do we like this? Is this worth eating or not? So the Venus flytrap does the same thing. It'll decide if what's in its trap is worthwhile and worth eating. And if it is, then it eats it up and it digests it, and it won't open again for 3 to 14 days. That's a long time. But if while it's snapped closed, it decides that whatever's in its mouth isn't good and it's not worthwhile, it might not be a bug, then it opens back up in a few minutes and it lets whatever it is got in there and lets it go. So you see that there's like, it looks like a bee stuck in its mouth right now. So it's probably going to eat that. So that's pretty cool, the Venus flytraps. Here we have maritime oaks, and maritime forests are found along the coastal areas of North Carolina, either on barrier islands, so all these islands out here that we have on our state, or next to marshes down near the coast. They're created as a result of salt spray, winds, and the harsh effects of sand striking the leaves and branches. So if you've been down at the beach before, you know it can be super windy. And that's the waves come in and that salt sprays everywhere and the wind blows it around and it's harsh. It's kind of rough. So it causes these forests to grow. And inside the forest, they consist of oak trees, red cedar, holly, and pine trees, and evergreen shrubs. So we talked about a shrub is kind of like a little bush. Together, the forest forms a canopy of interlocking branches. So all these branches that you see sticking off that are really big, they kind of latch together. And they protect everything in the underbrush from the forces of wind and salt spray. So everything underneath it on the ground gets protected by this big canopy. The trees also stabilize soil on the barrier islands, which reduces erosion. So it helps from us losing the soil like into the ocean. And it protects wildlife from hurricanes. Because remember, we had a hurricane this year already too. And the hurricane's coming off the coast. So down near Wilmington and all those beach towns, that's kind of where the hurricane comes in at. So these big forests help protect all the wildlife from the hurricanes. They also protect fresh water for wildlife. Here's our last plant. It's Spanish moss. And Spanish moss is not Spanish, and it's not moss. It's something called a bromeliad. I think I said that right. And it's actually in the pineapple family. So that would fit in great in our classroom, right? Because we have lots of pineapples. And it's from Mexico. It's not Spanish. Spanish moss loves healthy trees in a tropical swamp land. It doesn't plant roots on the tree. It just hangs on it and takes in rain, fog, sunlight, and airborne or waterborne dusts and debris. So it kind of protects the tree, right? It hangs out on it. It's not the actual tree or the green parts. It's this grayish, stringy stuff that you see hanging off. The surface of the Spanish moss plant is covered with tiny gray scales which trap water until the plant can absorb it. So the Spanish moss holds onto the water kind of like a glass holds onto water until we're ready to drink it. The Spanish moss holds onto the water until the tree is ready to absorb it. And then when the tissues plump up after a rain, the Spanish moss appears more green. So you can tell if it's got lots of water held in it by the color. This is super, super gray. So it says, as the water is used, it returns to a gray hue or a gray color. So you can tell right here, this is super gray. So the tree must have already drank up that water. The seeds of the moss have feathery appendages or things sticking off like dandelion seeds, and it allows them to float through the air until they land on a good spot to grow like another tree. Birds use it to build nests. Frogs and spiders live in it. And before tackling a mound of Spanish moss, you'll want to be on guard for snakes that might be hiding in it because it's long like a snake, right? So they could easily camouflage in there. All right, guys, those are all of our plants that we're going to learn about for the coastal plain. Let's learn about some animals. Woo, we got a big owl, the great horned owl. It's a very big one. They're very large birds. And we just learned that birds are called oviparous. They're oviparous because they do what? They lay eggs. They can grow up to the size of a goose or a groundhog. So we learned about groundhogs this year, and you probably have seen geese around a lot. I used to see them all the time in the mornings coming up the sidewalk to go to school. Their wingspan, so from this tip all the way to this tip when their arms are, or their wings are stretched out, can be 5 feet across. So I'm just like a couple inches taller than 5 feet. So if I were to lay down on the ground, from my head all the way to my toes, that's how long the owl's wings would be. It's found all over North Carolina, not just in the coastal plains. So you could find them here and where we live in Durham. They even roost in trees in cities and neighborhoods. So usually they're in woodlands, woods with lots of trees, but you might find them in your neighborhood too, in some trees. A pair of owls stays together for years. Owls usually take over an old hawk's nest and lay 2 eggs a year. Owls eat almost anything from beetles and mice to ducks, skunks, and porcupines. And in the cities, they even capture cats. So be careful with your cats outside. There are almost no predators of the adults, so not many things eat them. But they may be killed in confrontations or fights with eagles or other really big birds or great horned owls or something like that. All right, our next animal is a crayfish, and crayfish are crustaceans. So hold on to that word crustacean. We're not going to talk a whole lot about that right now, But in May, which is this month, I like to do a really big ocean unit with my classes, and we learn about different ocean animals, and we learn about other crustaceans. A crab is a crustacean, a shrimp is a crustacean. So that gives you kind of a hint. Crayfish are also crustaceans. They have 10 legs, and they live in streams and ponds and lakes. There are over 40 different kinds of crayfish. They look like little tiny mini lobsters with front pinching claws and an armored or hard body and a broad, thick tail. They have 3 main body parts: a head, a thorax, and an abdomen. And they have a hard exoskeleton that protects them. So we have our skeleton or our bones inside to protect our body and everything inside. They have an exoskeleton, which means the outside. So all their hard parts that protect their body are all on the outside, like a shell. Like if you ever eat shrimp and you have to peel their shell off, a crayfish has the same thing. So crayfish mothers lay hundreds of eggs at a time. Hundreds, and they lay eggs. That means they're oviparous. Or like Miss Cardozo's song, oviparous, oviparous. The crayfish is oviparous. When the eggs hatch, they are about the size of a pencil eraser. Oh my, look at that. So they are only about that big. That's little. Adults grow up to 2 inches. And they live for 3 to 5 years, so not super long time. Crayfish go through 3 molts in their lifetime, which means they shed their shell and make another one. They do that 3 times. Why do you think they might be shedding their shell? Think maybe they're getting bigger, like you guys have to maybe get rid of clothes and buy different sized, bigger clothes. Same thing, they're getting bigger. They have to molt and shed their shell and make another one. They eat pond plants, worms, snails, and tadpoles. Crayfish often get eaten by hawks, frogs, turtles, and fish. They fight hard with their tail and claws, though, and if they lose a claw or a leg in a battle, a new one grows back in its place. No big deal, they just grow another. It's kind of funny, right? All right, and our last animal is the wild horses. And I don't know why this is so dark, but it says that the horses are sometimes called banker horses because they live on the Outer Banks. So again, the Outer Banks are those islands out here that are out off the coast of our state. They have lived in North America for over 500 years, and there are now only 5 groups of horses left. Some North Carolinians, that's a person that lives in North Carolina, so all of us are North Carolinians, are working to protect the horses and keep them from becoming extinct, which means there's no more. So sometimes you might see a group of these wild horses down on the Outer Banks, which is pretty cool. So here are some other coastal plants and animals. We've got more turtles and birds and some other kinds of flowers and plants. This looks like an alligator or a crocodile. We've got ducks, right? Here's our maritime oaks, our crayfish, our Spanish moss. Here's the wild horses, the great horned owl, and the Venus flytrap. So you already know your job, right? Yeah, pick one plant and one animal. And if you want to draw them on a piece of paper while you look back on this video and pause so that you can look at the slides, then you can do that. Make sure you draw me a nice detailed picture so I can tell what it is. And give me a sentence with one of the facts that you learned about that plant or animal. Then you can upload it to Seesaw for me, or if you want to do it on Seesaw, I have a little template for you to use. It's up to you however you want to use it. I can't wait to see what plant and animal you guys picked. I hope that you guys had fun learning about the 3 regions of North Carolina. Bye!